Speaking. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for the second of our Translation Manchester seminar series. Please keep your video off, the usual Zoom etiquette here, and audio on mute. Any questions that you've got, please put them in the chat box as we go. We'll have a 5-minute question and answer session after each of our presenters has spoken. Here is our programme of the day. We've got 2 of our Translation Manchester Research Network partners presenting today. We've got Andy Vail presenting on behalf of the NIHR Research Design Service Northwest, and Bella Starling presenting on behalf of Vocal. And at the end of these sessions, you will see a Zoom poll will pop up at the very end. If you could please complete this before you leave the meeting, it just gives us some feedback on how useful these sessions are and how we can improve them going forward. If you've not come across Translation Manchester before and you're not familiar with the work we do to support translational research, then go take a look at our website. Jim will pop the link in the chat for you. In particular, we offer lots of free training. Go and have a look and get in touch if you're interested. We also have 2 flagship funding schemes. So if you're interested in those, the calls will open again in the summer. You can find the details on the previous calls on our website. So let's get going. I'd like to introduce Professor Andy Vail. Andy leads the Centre for Biostatistics in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health within the School of Health Sciences, and also directs the Greater Manchester office of the NIHR Research Design Service. So his time is divided between the Centre for Biostatistics and Salford Royal NHS Foundation Trust, where he also leads the statistics group and collaborates on clinical research. Most of Andy's clinical research collaboration is within the field of neuroscience and stroke. So hopefully, Andy, you'll be able to share your slides and start presenting for us. Thank you.
Okay, so it was a very kind introduction. I realise I must have left my details out of date on the Translation Manchester website. I'm no longer lead the Department of Biostatistics. That's now Jamie Kirkham, but the rest is still true. So today I'm talking about the Research Design Service, which is part of the NIHR structure really for helping researchers throughout applied health and social care research. So it's part of a national organisation, but by national we mean England rather than UK or Britain. And the idea of the Research Design Service is really to facilitate the quality of proposals going to the funding panels, not just the NIHR funding panels, but all the funding panels that are interested in funding applied health and social research. So that certainly applies to translational research. And the condition is that you're applying for grant money in national or international peer-reviewed funding competition. So anything that fits that bill is within our remit. You see, it still works in the old 10 regions of the NHS. We're in the Northwest region, of course. And I'm in the local Manchester office. So we've split the Northwest region into Mersey and Cheshire, Lancashire and South Cumbria, and Greater Manchester, really on the lines of the clinical research networks. For anyone who's involved with clinical research will be familiar with that sort of footprint. So where can we advise? So it's not just NIHR funding streams. That seems to be one of the sort of myths that's developed about us. Medical Research Council, ESRC, any of the charities, Wellcome Charity or the BHF, the CRUK, any of the big funding charities that are the national peer-reviewed competition for applied health or social care research. And what do we do? Well, this is a sort of general slide that says we cover the research methodology. So quantitative methods, qualitative methods, mixed methods research. We have health economists, health psychologists. Behaviour change is seen as a very fundamental thing in clinical research, whether you're changing the behaviour of patients or changing the behaviour of clinicians. And then specialist methodologies such as, we might talk about therapist research or data science type projects with large routine data sets. And our expertise, I think it might help people to know the names of individuals locally. So these aren't on the slides. So within statistics, myself and Professor David Reeves, who's based in primary care and does a lot of research with large data sets. In health psychology, we have Sarah Peters and Fiona Ulf, who are sort of experts in qualitative methodology and behaviour change. And in health economics, Catherine Payne and Rachel Elliott will be familiar names for anyone who's worked with the Health Economists Centre within the university. So they're the kind of people who are leading on these methodological disciplines. And then we have a whole staff of sort of research fellows, lecturer grade staff, who are actually providing the daily sort of face-to-face advice. What do we help with? Well, as well as the research design, as the name implies, we're also we train our frontline advisors in understanding the differences and the specific requirements of the main funding streams. We're particularly adept at finding collaborators and building teams for and around research projects, helping to formulate the research question in quite the right way that fits the specific funding bodies. The kind of grantsmanship, the telling the story, not assuming knowledge that panels won't have, making sure it stresses the right points. One of the issues we often have with translational research is that people who have been used to doing biomedical research will talk about the molecules and what's going on at that level, whereas for most clinical research funding, they're much more interested in the patients and what are the problems for the patients and what's going to be solved. So actually sort of changing the gist of the grant writing background so that it appeals to the right kind of panel. We signpost obviously to specialised support. We have a fair understanding of regulatory issues. You know, will this project need human tissue authority? Will it need MHRA? Will it obviously, almost certainly, will need ethics and R&D approvals, university sponsorship, and so on. We can point you in the right directions for those. Particularly important for those who have been used to laboratory-based research, all the clinical research funders want to see involvement of the public. So the patient-public perspective, how to go about that is a key part of what we do. And then things like providing a critical read to make sure the proposal that's about to be submitted is up to scratch. What else do we do? You may see us around in bulletins and on the website. We run specific events targeting and informing about the ins and outs of specific funding streams. We run sort of mock panels that can be a very useful way of getting feedback from a number of different disciplines, as if by a constituted panel, typically including some clinicians, methodologists from different disciplines, members of the public, so that you can have sort of realistic feedback. And then there's all sorts of resources on the website you can see the links for there. What happens when someone contacts us? Basically, it's very simple. The advice request form consists of telling us who you are and how we can contact you. And it may be anything from a very rough idea as to I want to do research in this area, through to quite a detailed idea about exactly what you want to do and how. Assuming it's applied health and social care research funding that you're seeking, and that it's in peer review competition and on a national scale, you'll be eligible. You'll be assigned someone who will look after you. This will be one of our frontline advisors, let's say typically a lecturer or research fellow grade. And they obviously won't be your only advisor. They'll put you in touch with all the specific disciplines you need to support you in putting together a strong grant application. Obviously, we can't guarantee success, but we can at least ensure that your application stands a good chance. So this is the sort of thing we'll cover. Some people will come to us at the very beginnings of an idea. Other people may come to us as experienced research teams. They already have a full proposal and they just want to run it by someone as a kind of critical friend. So depending on where you come to us, you'll be receiving advice on these kind of issues. And most importantly, perhaps the translational medicine people is, as I say, the public involvement is a key aspect of what is being provided by the Research Design Service. And one of the reasons why people will come to us, a particular draw, is that we will provide public involvement funding. So a kind of catch-22 situation for many researchers is that they can't obtain public involvement without finances to do it, but of course they can't get the finances to do it because they haven't got the public involvement yet. So we're designed to kind of get around that problem, and with a simple form completion saying you are currently receiving advice from the Research Design Service, you do want to undertake some public involvement activity, then we can fund the sort of meeting time, costs of travel, any kind of respite care issues that you'd have in getting the right patient groups, the right members of the public to a meeting to discuss your plans and how to improve them. So here's some feedback from a very happy customer, client, saying support has been really useful. They've taken advantage both of structured meetings and one-to-one support, and they've also been very pleased that we could put them in contact with the additional members of the team to make a perfect research team for the kind of proposal they were suggesting. I should say, perhaps it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, almost all clinical research is going to be multidisciplinary. And so if you're coming from a laboratory science background where it's often unidisciplinary, actually getting the right contacts with the clinical research is quite an effort sometimes. So how do you access us? By any means practical. Hopefully you can make notes of any of those contact details. And that's all I have to say. I'm quite happy to receive questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. I was just going to ask Andy, when it comes to the multidisciplinary teams and getting those established, are you in a position to sort of support that if you've got an academic who's looking for a clinician in a particular area? And these are sort of queries we get as well. I just wondered if you're in a position there to sort of connect people.
Absolutely. So it'll often be the clinician who comes to us and is looking for the academic collaborator. They may be looking for an academic collaborator in a specific clinical or scientific area. More often, they're looking for methodological collaborators. So, you know, they want to do clinical research. They know they need a statistician. They might know they need a health economist. They might need qualitative research as part of the proposal. So we would have those contacts. But equally, if someone comes to us from an academic discipline and says, well, I've got this idea, but I just don't know the clinicians out there in the NHS trusts or the GPs that would enact this, then we will have those contacts and networks.
That's great. It's good for us to know, and good for, I'm sure, most people on the call to know that they can go to certain places to find the people they need within their team to make these sort of translational funding bids, which, as you say, are really multidisciplinary teams, competitive enough by having the right expertise and people involved. So I've shared the link there to the website for the Research Design Service Northwest. And is that the best way to get in touch with your team, Andy, is to submit a query through there?
That's certainly the easiest way. So if you go to that website, there's a big sort of request advice button. Click on and complete the form.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we'll move on then. Again, if you've got any questions, by all means ask. It might be that people want to get in touch specifically about their projects. Use the link to the website and the request information from there. And we'll move on. So I'd like to introduce Bella Starling, who's going to present to us on behalf of Virco. Bella is a Wellcome Trust Engagement Fellow and Co-Director of Virco, which is hosted by the Manchester University Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. And Bella's career has spanned neuroscience, stem cell and genetic research, scientific writing, biomedical ethics, public engagement, and patient involvement and science policy. And Bella's fellowship explored how public engagement with research can act as a catalyst for social and scientific change. Thank you, Bella.
Great, thanks very much for having me. I hope everyone can hear me okay and can see my slides.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Bella.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Just let you know that I'm in an office environment at the moment, so there might be a little bit of background noise. It was really great to hear from Andy actually, and the emphasis on public involvement in terms of the research design services work, and also a great example of being joined up. So the Vocal team actually host the PPI, the Public Involvement Advisor, for the Northwest Research Design Service. So we're working as one in this area. So that's just in case you were wondering the links there between the Research Design Service and Vocal. So this is Vocal. I'm the director of Vocal. I've just put here a screenshot of our website, which was actually co-designed with patients and members of the public. So it's really aimed at that audience. So who are we? We're a group, a team of around 12 that are based within Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust, but working across the whole kind of research landscape within Greater Manchester. What do we do? Our vision, our role is to connect people, patients, communities, and health research, really for everyone's benefit. And I suppose you would call us specialists in patient and public involvement and engagement with research. And do please visit our website, links at the end of this presentation, to find out more about all the kinds of work that we do. But as Andy said, you know, public involvement is a really integral component of applications to NIHR, to Wellcome, and to many other funders, and we're certainly able to support, as the RDS is, applications to all of these funders. We're an integral part of lots of NIHR infrastructure within Greater Manchester. So we've got, you know, kind of very much an integral part of the NIHR Manchester Biomedical Research Centre and clinical research facilities. Also, obviously, work with the RDS and other NIHR and research projects and infrastructure within Greater Manchester. And on this slide, I've got a link to our strategy, and we have developed a strategy so that we can apply the principles of all of our work across all of the partners that we work with. So, for example, if you go and visit the strategy, you'll see that there's a really strong focus on inclusive research. So working with those people and communities who stand to benefit the most from research, and whose research stands to benefit the most from listening to different voices and raising awareness of research within different communities. So go and have a look at that strategy if you'll find it useful, and you might see how it could be applied to some of your work. So much like science, much like research, public involvement and engagement comes with its own jargon and with its own abbreviations. You'll see here a few different definitions from funders and from partners. So NIHR Involve, which was really the main focus of NIHR's efforts around public involvement until recently, draws very much a distinction between involvement, participation, and engagement. So involvement is where members of the public are actively involved. So they're acting as research advisors, if you like, for research and research organizations. Participation is when people take part in research, and engagement is the more kind of shared learning, shared awareness, making sense of research and science. Wellcome has moved forwards its kind of strategy on public involvement, and its two main, you know, kind of aims for public involvement are to empower people, so helping people to respond and appreciate, I suppose, health and research and innovation, And then bringing that lived experience, bringing that living expertise into research to create people-centered health research. And, you know, much like we talk very much about patient-centered care, you know, this is about people-centered health research. And together, you know, the ultimate aim is to, you know, help us all kind of value each other's work and develop relationships of trust between science and research and society. And clearly, you know, living through COVID is an example of how science, society, research and health is really kind of mutually dependent. So our approach at Vocal is to actually bring the kind of, I suppose, the very closely aligned fields of engagement and involvement together. And so, yes, it's bringing health research and people together for everyone's benefit. And again, if you want to find out more about our approach, how we evaluate our work, what our strategy is, how, you know, and some case studies of what we've done in the past, you can go to the link on this peer-reviewed paper that's been published a couple of years ago. As well as having our strategy and, you know, a very defined approach, we work very much within the context of the national standards for patient and public involvement. So we work within this context, and actually we were also instrumental in developing the standards. And if you've not come across these standards before, do go and have a look and just think about how they might apply to your research context and to the people you work with. They're not strictly speaking standards, they're more a set of kind of guiding principles for how patient and public involvement should work, especially in the context of NIHR-based research. And more practically, what can public involvement and engagement help with? So these are some of the questions that researchers will come to us with and want to be talking through with patient and public contributors. So things like, am I measuring the most relevant outcomes for patients? Will people understand my patient information sheet? All those kinds of things. These are the kinds of questions that we deal with on a daily basis, working with our public contributors and our patient partners. And it's through kind of working together in research that we can really feel the benefits of public involvement. So as well as informing research, public involvement has been demonstrated to increase people's agency, the sense of themselves and the difference that they make in the world, their knowledge and confidence about research. Research clearly benefits from having diverse perspectives and from bringing in that living experience and expertise of people who are, you know, kind of often going through very challenging situations. There has been a link established between effective engagement and involvement and wider participation. There's still emerging data on that, but it is definitely linked. And some of the projects that we've worked with have really worked with communities, especially communities who might be less well listened to in research, to really think about how to design effective recruitment strategies and how to co-design effective recruitment strategies with the people that, you know, that stand to benefit the most from research. As I mentioned before, increased relationships of trust through public involvement, and ultimately real and effective changes to service delivery by taking a very inclusive approach to health research. So one of the questions that Becky suggested their answer is what kinds of researchers who can work with us? And really the answer to that is anyone. We work across the whole research, translational research spectrum. So from basic laboratory based scientists through to applied health researchers and everything in between across all research areas. So we work in genetics, we work in maternal and fetal health research, we'll work in respiratory research, we'll work, you know, in a very wide variety of research settings. So we've yet to have encountered a research setting that has really stumped us. So, but I'm always open to that challenge and seeing what we can do. But yeah, and we're always really interested to find out more about research and what's going on and how we can support the public involvement to your research. I've just put here, you know, the kind of research cycle diagram that we work to, and you know, this will hopefully apply across many different areas of research. And this is how, you know, just some really short examples, they're not exhaustive at all, about how public involvement can feed in to those different layers of the research cycle. So, you know, you might want to work with communities to clarify the research question or even to hone it down more. Lots of work around dissemination of research and how to work, especially with different communities, to disseminate some of the research findings, help with writing protocols, and, you know, really importantly, thinking about how to translate research findings into design and implementation of services. And again, just coming back to the day-to-day, to the tangible, you know, these are some of the questions that researchers come to us with in terms of wanting to think about public involvement in research. And we will always work with researchers right from the outset to really hone down the purpose of public involvement. And then that can make designing it and implementing it much easier once we're all clear about the purpose. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of some of our case studies. So you can access these through the links at the bottom of each slide. But this is an example of a project that we did called Breathtaking Lungs, which was really kind of combining both public engagement and patient involvement. This study, well, this project was based in Wythenshawe, so which is an area that has a pretty high incidence of lung conditions. It's quite close to the airport. It's an area that has quite high indices of social deprivation. And right on the doorstep is Wythenshawe Hospital with a fantastic, amazing respiratory research centre and lots of researchers working in this area. So we really brought together the two. So we did lots of community-based activities, raising awareness of lung health and lung research. We did this in community centres. We did this with younger children. We did it with patients. And as a result of that engagement, many more of the local community with specific respiratory conditions are now working hand in hand with those researchers in Wythenshawe to design and deliver research, to bring in those lived experience to the research that is going on. So, and so we've fostered a community of, if you like, patients and community members and researchers who are working together to improve lung health. Another example is in a really sensitive and emotional kind of research area. So discussing stillbirth and neonatal death, which is part of the Maternal and Fetal Health Research Centre within the University of Manchester and MFT. And here we worked really specifically with Jewish communities, partly to raise awareness of some of the research going on, but partly also because the researchers in the research centre had identified that they weren't engaging or involving those communities in the research that they were doing. So through a kind of joint creative approach of workshops and kind of discussing some of these taboos, there is a much greater level of awareness of some of the research going on within these communities, and the researchers in the maternal and fetal health research centres are now including those communities on their research advisory groups, in the design and delivery of research. And I've mentioned our research advisory groups. We have very many research advisory groups that are there to support all different kinds of research. If you go to that link at the bottom of the page, you'll be able to see all of the research advisory groups that we support in one way or another. And these are just a couple of examples of some of those research advisory groups. But we also do have very specific, condition-specific research advisory groups too. Not quite sure how much time I've got left, but I just wanted to, you know, kind of again get into the nitty-gritty. If you're submitting a grant application, what do you need to think of in terms of public involvement? So these are some typical NIHR application questions. So, you know, kind of as Andy mentioned, there's sometimes a bit of a catch-22. Funders are asking for public involvement before a grant is submitted, but then, you know, how do you do that? How do you resource it? All those kinds of things. So I think this is where we can help. So these are some of the questions, you know, that are asked in an NIHR application form. We would typically sit down with a researcher, potentially also with a public contributor, and work through some of these in advance of a grant application. Or you might want to be doing something that is outside of an application form. And certainly we work with very many researchers in that way. And these are just, you know, these are just some of the ideas. I do need to say that we are I suppose we're a unit that operates on a cost recovery model. So everything that we do does need to be resourced in some way, shape or form, but we're very open to, you know, kind of providing initial advice and starting initial conversations with a view to then thinking about a grant application and being costed into that, for example. Funders are always keen to see how effective PPIE has been planned, public involvement has been planned, and these are some of the things that we would talk through with you as researchers, in particular thinking about the communities that we work with and how to be culturally appropriate and how to reach those who are perhaps less well listened to in research. And this is just really a slide to emphasize the last point. We have a really, really strong focus in Vocal on health inequalities and how we might address some of those health inequalities through translational research. So when we sit down with researchers and start thinking about public involvement, some of what we will also do is thinking about really defining who the people are that need to be engaged and involved with the translational research that is happening. And so again, these are just some of the questions and the steps that we would go through in thinking about public involvement as part of research. And I'll stop there. I'd love to hear your questions or reactions to what I've just been talking about. And yes, I'm assuming the slides will be circulated afterwards. So you should have all the links to further reading there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Bella. If anyone has got any questions, please do drop them in the chat. Have one come through. How could we differentiate the terminology, i.e. PI, PPI or PPIE? Are the use of these terms different between the funders, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And actually, you know, I think I think sometimes we're guilty of using too many acronyms ourselves. I mean, I think on one of my slides, I mentioned that there are slightly different, you know, definitions between funders, and I would always just recommend going and finding out more about that. But for me, what is really important is at the outset is understanding the reason why, the purpose of doing public involvement for a particular research study or for a research project. And you know, that might be different across different areas of translational research. It might be different, you know, according to discipline or subject area. So, and then it becomes easier, because if you've got a clear purpose and a clear aim for public involvement, then you can almost forget about the definitions because you're defining it yourself within your own research. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's great, thank you, Bella. And I was just going to ask, for maybe early career researchers who are very much in the lab doing their postdocs, doing PhDs or fellows, who haven't done any patient engagement or public engagement before, if they were, would you be able to support those kinds of research and getting some sort of exposure or experience in that area?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, we've worked a lot with in the area of genetic research. We've also worked quite a bit in the area of chronobiology, which, you know, kind of well, especially chronobiology doesn't have an immediately apparent patient audience to talk to. I mean, it's obviously relevant across a whole area of health research. So then we would work with researchers to think about perhaps some of the more kind of sense making, raising awareness, dialogue and debate around their area of research. And what we'll often find is that as a result of that engagement, both researchers and public contributors can come up with ideas for the more active public involvement, if you see what I mean. So I'll give you an example. We worked with some researchers looking at juvenile idiopathic arthritis and the genetics of juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And through doing some kind of engagement events, which were about explaining the genetics, about thinking about how drugs work, how treatments work, that kind of thing, they were really able to think about some research questions that came out of that engagement, and they were able to take those forward as grant applications. So it's sometimes, I guess, just being open to the unexpected outcome of engagement as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like it can for many research, it can feel like a box ticking exercise, but actually they get so much more from it when they get stuck into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would say that, wouldn't I?
Right, if there's any more questions, please pop them in the chat. Jim, would you be able to just launch the feedback poll? And I'll just thank both presenters for coming along today and giving us an overview of how they can support translational research, and encourage you to get in touch with them should you have any further questions or specific projects that you want to discuss. And I think I will just very briefly do a quick slide share. Just to let you know that our next seminar will be on the 28th of April. We will have Paul Hanmer from the Innovation Nexus and Charlotte Stockton-Powdrill from the Research Project Managers Network. And if you're not familiar with the broader Translation Manchester Research Network, you can find out all about it on our website. This brings together over 50 partners, not just at the university, but outside within the NHS as well. These people and these networks, organisations are all here to support translational research. There are organisations you're probably not even aware of that can help support you in your progression and your research. So do go on and have a look. And we're always looking for new partners to join the network. So if you've got any suggestions or you are a partner, interested partner yourself, please do get in touch with us at Translation Manchester. Okay, I think that there are no further questions, so I think we'll tie this one up. Thank you all for coming along. I hope it's been useful, and we hope to see you at another seminar soon. And thanks to our speakers.